What I was talking about last time then, so I'm just going to um, use this set of notes here because uh, instead of writing new notes, right? So I already posted this. You have it. So this will be good for you. It'll be good for me. So I'll just go off these notes I already have, and then you can check out the other notes I did as well. But what I was talking about last time then is the following. Um, for Aristotle, as if you look at that little diagram there, um, all so each one of these here we can call a what Aristotle calls a sphere of action. That there's some action. I have like games, war, problem solving, and so on. Um, everything, right? Every action, every endeavor, every even concept to a degree aims at something. And so we were talking about like the sphere of house building. The if you think in terms of like a final cause or a final goal, the purpose, the function of house building is a house, right? The function of surgery is health. The function of car mechanicking, if I can make up a word, is to fix cars and so on and so forth. So um, you can ignore this uh, word Kant here, Kant. I've mentioned them before. We're not really going to talk about them in class, but when I was writing these notes, I was making a connection for my ethics class. Yeah, techne. That's right. I'm going to talk about that. Um, I was making a reference to Kant where we had studied in an ethics class, so you can disregard Kant there. Um, but yes, techne is the word. So every techne, every skill, every sphere that involves skill or craft, skill is probably a better word in this case. Um, aims at something, aims at some good. It has instrumental value, value derived from some end or from some consequence. And so the value of house building is a house, right? The value of house building, the value of the skill of house building, of that techne is the consequence of a house. Consequence of surgery is a healthy body. The consequence of car mechanicking, I'm kind of being, deliberately like funny there, is a well-running car, and on and on and on, right? Um, but then there's this notion of intrinsic value. And so Aristotle is he's in one sense doing science, right? he's if we can compare it to like today's science, Aristotle thinks in large part that he's noticing some things about the world and that he's reporting on it, right? So one thing he notices is that there are some things that are instrumentally valuable, like we just talked about. But then he notices that all these things, everything, doesn't just have its own, you might call local good, right? So the good that is the consequence of the action, like a house to house building. But he notices all these things aim at something else. All these things aim at one, um, what he calls absolutely final thing. Someone remind me, by the way, after class, to post uh, the virtue ethics lecture um, that I have, uh, that I was reading. I'm not going to continue to read it just because I'm going to do this instead, but I'll go ahead and post it for you. It's like 3 pages, and you can just sort of read it yourself. But if someone would remind me to do that, please. Um, all these things point everything. So again, all these things have their own end, their own individual end. the end of house building is a house and so on. But he notices also that all these things point to something bigger. I don't want to say like I hate that phrase like bigger than oneself. You have to participate in something bigger than oneself. I think that's very vague. Um, it's not very specific, and or if it is, if it isn't vague, then it's very specific about something. I'm not going to get into it, but um, so maybe I shouldn't have said bigger. But all things point to some what he calls absolutely final end. The some chief good is what he says. And he says that thing, the thing which all other things pursue, is eudaimonia. Eudaimonia. Um, Literally translated would mean something like well-being. Where I'm going to use the word happiness to some degree, but happiness really isn't a great translation. But it's hard not to use the word. So I'm going to go back and forth between meaning well-being and happiness. But hopefully I'll explain why that's the case. The thing with happiness is so look at it this way, right? So why pursue house building? The art, the techne of house building, to have a house, right? Why? What do we want with a house? We don't want any house. We want a good house, right? We want a house that's well built. We want a house that is suitable to live in. Not just. Do you know what a shanty is, or a shanty town? Have you heard of that before? Do you know what a shanty is, or a shanty town? SHANTY. Anybody? You're familiar with it, believe it or not. You might not know the word, but you're familiar with the concept. I guarantee it. So do you know? So take places like yeah, yeah, Amelia, yeah, like Bombay, or Calcutta in India, right? Or like Lagos, uh, you know, um, there's a lot, Hong Kong, a lot of these big, huge, massive cities that have millions and millions of people. Mexico City's another one. Um, we have some shanty type situations here in the U.S., but not like other countries. A shanty or a shanty town is usually a place outside of the sort of official city limits that houses huge, massive populations, like in India, ranging into the millions, that live in these rickety, poor, unsafe. I want not buildings; they're shanties. They're just loosely put together structures that people live in. Those are shanties, right? So the point of house building isn't to build a shanty. It's to build a house. It's to build something that is worth living in, that is well built, right? That's going to last, that provides adequate shelter, and so on and so forth. But then you might ask, well, what's the goal of that? Why have a house? And from Aristotle's perspective, right? The goal of human activity is, as we said, sort of, before, like justice and all that, right? But the absolutely final thing that we're all after is eudaimonia, is a life worth living, a life well lived, according to Aristotle. Not necessarily simply a life of pleasure, not, it's not necessarily following a rule like utilitarianism or the golden rule, or, something like that, but a life well lived. And this is what we mean by eudaimonia. And so for Aristotle, we choose other things, the things we choose in our lives, right? Whether it be, the water that you might be drinking, or maybe the clothes you wear, the partner you're with, to a degree, the car you drive, right? I mean, just everything, the thing, like the things you choose to do for Aristotle are ultimately chosen with happiness in mind, right? Now, it's not to say that our choices aren't limited somehow. It's not to say we always make the right choices. It's nothing like that. But if you consider for a second why you do the things you do, right? Um, you might see where Aristotle's coming from. Kind of like what we did with utilitarianism and how the utilitarians thought, particularly Bentham, thought that everything you did was motivated by pleasure or pain. Aristotle thinks that everything you do is motivated by living a life that's worth living. So, why do you go to school? The idea is so you can have a better life, generally speaking, right? Why do you study this major as opposed to that major? Because you think that doing that is going to provide a certain type of let's say financial gain in the long run, that you think it's worth putting your time into that degree, right? Um, why do you why are you boyfriend or girlfriend with this or that person, right? because because they presumably do something for you in that relationship that makes living better, and on and on and on. Why do you have a pet? Why do you, even the negative stuff, why do you put up with a toxic person in your life to a degree? Because it might be easier in some sense than dealing with it. I'm not saying that's the right choice. I'm just saying it makes sense in terms that, like, it might be perceived easier to deal with, that sort of thing. Um, so the things we do, we choose for Aristotle because we think that it has a hand in making us happy, if you will. Um, but when you ask about happiness, you can't ask that same question about happiness. You can't say, but why be happy? Because happiness for Aristotle doesn't bring you anything. Happiness is the goal. Happiness is the thing, if you look at this diagram here, that's absolutely final. There's no after happiness. It's the thing to which all other things point to. Right? So if you see happiness and you see the all other things there represent things like house building, the medical arts, the military arts, and so on. That's what that represents. And then there's different ways of you know of building houses, and there's all sorts of other skills that are directed toward building houses and so on, right? There's all sorts of ways of studying the military arts that all are directed toward that one sphere, and so on and so forth. And so this is kind of a sort of minimal representation um, of the chief good, of happiness, of eudaimonia, for Aristotle. Okay. So, comments, questions on that? Okay. Hearing none. I'm just giving you time in case someone's typing or something. All right. It doesn't look like anyone's going to say anything. Okay. Um, Now, a question becomes then, well, how does one become happy? And the answer is one becomes happy. One lives a eudaimonious life. One lives a life that is worth living, given the capacities that humans have, by the result of habit. Right? And so And so habit is going to be a matter of rationality, training, and contemplation, as we'll find out. So what does that mean? Well, let's sort of break that down here. Let's talk about the virtues. So whatever the virtues are, we'll get into that here in a little bit. The virtues split off into two different aspects. We talk of the intellectual virtues, and then we talk of the moral virtues. Now here, obviously, I didn't have the room, and so you'll see here, that's where the moral virtues is going to split off. That's this part here, right? But let's focus on the intellectual virtues here. So on the intellectual side of virtue, we mean things like teaching, learning, and experience. Let me... I don't know, this isn't... hold on a second. I'm just being fancy. I usually talk about, that expression, two sides of the same coin. So I'm getting a coin. is what I'm doing. And I'm going to literally, I think, demonstrate that expression. I was trying to do this the other day in class, and nobody had a coin, and so damn it, I'm gonna do it. All right. Let's see. Okay. So the intellectual virtues break down into teaching, learning, and experience, right? Now, one way to think about that is, here's my coin, and this coin, I guess I'm not going to use my pad. I can take this glove off. And let's let this coin represent let's say experience, right? So this coin, it has two sides. It kind of has three, really, like, so there's the edge there. Oh, that's interesting. Ooh, I'm going to update my metaphor. That just clicked. I'm going to update my metaphor. I think this will work better. This is interesting. Sorry. You just saw me have an idea. This coin is going to represent, here, maybe that's better. This coin is going to represent, the whole coin, the entire coin will represent, let's just say, knowledge. So I've never used this version of the metaphor before, so if it doesn't work, forgive me, but let's let this represent knowledge. Now, on either side is teaching and learning. Yes? Teaching and learning. They're two sides of the same coin. And there's the other side. That's the... It's not picking it up. There we go. That's the flat side. Not the flat side. Let's call it the round side, right? And we're going to let that side be experience. And experience is what binds the other two sides, right? And together, you have knowledge. There's probably something wrong with that, but I'll have to think about it. But for our purposes, I'm going to make it work. Here's the thing about teaching and learning. So let's let our piece of knowledge, right? Let's let our piece of knowledge be knowledge of what? Of how to fix a car, right? I guess. Okay. Now, on the one side, in order to fix a car, you must be able to what? To learn how to fix a car, right? There must be steps. There must be something for you to learn to do, right? I mean, that probably goes without saying, but we need to stipulate it, right? There must be something to learn. But if there's something to learn, then presumably there's something to teach. You don't get one without the other. Does that make sense to you? So if I had, let's see, I don't know if I can represent this or not. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to represent this. Let me do this. So here's my little cube here. And all sides are identical. They're really not. There's one side has some engraving on it, but you probably can't see it, and it's fine. Let's pretend. So it's all equal. Now let's let this represent a mystery. Right? Here with this, you can very clearly tell the difference between learning and teaching. I'll get to experience here in a little bit, right? This is distinguishable. This is indistinguishable. All sides are the same, right? Now, if I come to you, whatever this is, and I say, I know this thing, right? I know this thing. And I'm like, okay, what's this? And I point to that. Now, they all look the same, right? They're indistinguishable from each other. I say, what's this? You say, well, that's a mystery. Like, well, but what's this? Like, well, that's also a mystery, right? Like, I there's no way for me to explain what that is. I said, well, how do all the sides relate together, right? Well, the whole thing is the thing I'm claiming to know. That's how they relate together. Like, you don't get this without all the other stuff. I'm like, okay, but it's not really telling me anything, right? It's telling me something basic that is sort of obvious. It's what we call trivial. You're not actually learning anything about this by saying all the sides are part of the whole, right? But I say, but I want to know what this is, and that relation to that side, to this side, right? Like that's what I want to know. How does this relate to this, right? And you say, give me that, and you look at, and in doing so, now which side was I pointing to? You can't tell because they're all identical, right? And that's the point. The point is that this is a mystery, whatever this is, right? And you can't tell me what it is other than say, this is the thing. This is, insert your favorite mystery here, right? And so Aristotle's point here is that this wouldn't count as knowledge in any way because it can't be taught. Why can't it be taught? Because you can't distinguish anything. There's nothing to actually tell. And if it can't be taught, it can't be learned. Does that make sense to you? Here, I can say, here's what I'm going to teach you about fixing a car. That's what you need to learn. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. And then you have experience. And there are some things that are learnable that aren't taught in like an expressed that aren't taught in a manner that like a teacher would teach. But there are some things you learn through experience. Does that make sense to you? Right. And so this would count as knowledge, whereas this is a mystery. That's a mystery. Knowledge, mystery. Discernible, identifiable, articulable. I can articulate what this is, cannot articulate what this is. It's a mystery. It's a thing. Right? That's all it is. Okay. All right. Comments, questions about that? What's the expression? You picking up what I'm laying down? I hope I'm not boring anybody. All right. I think yeah, I'm gonna use that from now on. I like that. That was new to me. I that just occurred to me. I need to think about it more. But okay, now how does this relate to Aristotle more directly? Um, okay, so we see here then the intellectual virtues are about teaching, learning, and experience, and we can split that up into the practical and the theoretical. Now, by theoretical wisdom, right? This is kind of what I was talking about in terms of the teaching, right? So imagine house building, car fixing, like being a car mechanic and being a surgeon. On the one hand, you have the theoretical aspect of things. So in doctor school, as opposed to saying medical school, right? In doctoring school, um, you read a lot, you watch a lot of videos, you watch a lot of people working on bodies and so on. You see a lot of dead bodies. Um, you do a lot of observing, you do a lot of reading, you do a lot of thinking about stuff, you do a lot of figuring out problems, and so on and so forth. And a lot of it is done, you might say, up here. Yes, a lot of it's done, in your head. It's intellectual. What we mean by theoretical, it comes from the Greek word theoretikos, which means to contemplate, to deliberate, not simply to think about, but to sit down and deliberately consider the thing and the consequences of the thing, um, what knowledge you have of the situation, right? So here, maybe I can blow this up a little bit for you. the the consequences of the thing in question or of the action, knowledge of the situation that you have, what you know about the world relative to that situation. This is about your intelligence, in a sense. If you want, like, the word intelligence is derived from, sort of loosely, one interpretation is sort of from two words. This is kind of a loose thing here, just, but enter and ledger, which are the words, like between the lines, literally. So being intelligent is being able to see what's not there, reading between the lines, like literally, right? And this is all intellectual stuff. This happens up here, right? And you need that, right? A doctor who never read anything. I was I was an under I was gonna say I was an undergraduate once, but um uh when I was an undergraduate, I remember being in this class. I don't remember what class it was, but I was in this class, and it must have been a science class, I think. Anyway, we were in groups, and there was this student there. We were doing group work that was being graded, and she, like like leaned over and wanted to cheat off me. Like, and I know it was group work, but there was some things, like there was a portion of the work that we had to do sort of by ourselves. But she leaned over and wanted to freaking, like, cheat. And I'm like, no. Right? I'm like, no. Like, absolutely not. There was another time in that class where we were doing some work, and she just refused to do any of the work in class. She sat back the whole time with her cap down, didn't talk, didn't say anything. I finally got on to her. I'm like, "Are you going to help us or not?" And she leaned over, and that was about it, right? Point is that, could you imagine, like, you know, like your nurse or your doctor not being active in their own learning? Like, would you want to go to that doctor? Like, no. No, not to put words in your mouth, but, probably not. Um yeah, right. Thumbs down, man. Um Probably not. So that intellectual part is incredible. The strictly intellectual part of the thinking and the deliberating and the thinking through consequences and actions, like the real deep thinking, not just I'm thinking about something or I have a thought about something, but the actual take time, deliberate, contemplative thinking is important. And it requires a lot from you. You have to know other stuff about other stuff in order to have complete thoughts and so on. But then, so that's theoretical wisdom, wisdom that comes from thought, mathematics, right? Or how to fix a car. Or I was listening to news radio last night, and they're talking about the Trump trial, and the reporter kept talking about what's the guy's name? Braggs, the DA, the New York DA who's indicted Trump. Anyway, the reporter was talking about, so we don't have yet the second part of Bragg's theorizing, and I'm using that word on purpose, in order to decide. We, the public, don't have the second element needed to turn those indictments into a federal case. And the reporter kept saying, referring to is his name Braggs? It's Braggs, isn't it? We don't have Braggs's theory of the case, is what he said. Theory of the case. And I thought that was interesting. You don't hear that too often. And what he meant is we don't have Bragg's theorizing his deliberate contemplative reasoning for why the things that he did here, the presumed, the alleged illegal activity in his bookkeeping, we don't have the second other thing that he did that would make that a federal case. And he referred to that whole process as Braggs's theory of the case. So, point here is that theory is important here. Theory is explanation. It's the reasons for something. It's intellectual. We need that. And there is theoretical knowledge. So you have theoretical knowledge of how to fix a car, of mathematics, of doctoring, of lawyering, and so on, right? That's all theoretical. But then, on the other side, you have the practical virtues, or what we might say practical wisdom, as opposed to theoretical wisdom. And that's hold on, sorry. That's the round side of the coin here, right? The thin side of the coin, but it encompasses everything. Now, let's say you're sick and you need surgery. And you set up your consultation with the surgeon. You go to the appointment. The surgeon comes in. Hi, nice to meet you. And he says, now look, I want you to rest assured, be calm. He says, I've read everything there is to know about surgery. I've watched every video. I went to doctoring school, and believe me, like, we watched all of it. I know I have a complete theoretical understanding of surgery. So I just want to put you at ease. So we'll do the surgery tomorrow. Do you have any questions for me? What would your question be? Can I have a new doctor? Sure. What else? Like what question what question would you ask? Right, right. So look, he says, I told you, look, I'm doctor, right? There's my degree. I went to fancy school, right? And fancy school gave me a degree. I'm telling you, we read everything. I understand everything there is to know about surgery, right? Yeah. So he just graduated. Yeah, you would ask, has he ever operated before? Has he ever actually, right, performed? Wouldn't you? Everyone does have to start somewhere. That's right. And but By the time you get to your first patient as an actual surgeon, you will have already, right, practiced, and you'll have started on dead bodies, right? Actually, you'll have started. I forget the names of things, but you'll have started on lifelike material. Actually, you would have probably started on dead bodies. Um, I don't actually know. No, you would have started on the material first, I think, the lifelike material. Then you would have graduated to the dead bodies, to the cadavers, and so on, um, and so on. But point is, and then you will have had some practice as a student with doctoring and with sick people. You will have assisted in, and you gradually get more experience. By the time that you're actually on your own, you will have already performed surgery before. Lifelike, no, there's well, in some cases they'll use meat, but no, there's a certain type of material that looks like and feels like skin. And it's very, like, it's about as similar to skin as you can get. And then the adipose tissue underneath the skin and all of that, and cartilage. So they have like lifelike stuff that you sort of practice on first, right? Because same with a mechanic, right? Because there are things you learn from experience that you learn from experience, that you're not going to learn in doctoring school, or that you're not going to learn in automotive school, that you're not going to learn, somewhere else, right? Teachers, for example, teachers are rarely taught how to teach. Oh yeah. No, it's very complex. Um, but teachers are rarely taught how to teach. Most teachers learn from experience. And it's funny too, even in schools where you do go to learn, that have an emphasis on teaching, everybody will tell you, every teacher will tell you, every professor, every instructor, every teacher, they will all tell you the same thing. You don't learn how to teach until you start teaching. It doesn't matter how much schooling you've had. Right? And so this is the point of practical wisdom here, is it's knowledge about the world, and so is theoretical knowledge, right? But um you gain knowledge of what plants are poisonous. Like how do we know now what plants are poisonous? Like, we know because of a long human history and interaction of plants, because somebody somewhere ate a plant and died, because there was no manual in the beginning, right? Now there's like chemical analysis, and you could conceivably get a totally unknown plant and chemically analyze it, and verify to a degree, like, whether that plant is toxic or not. But you can't to a 100% degree, right? The plant might not be toxic. It takes experience, right? And so there's an aspect to learning that takes experience, that you can't just learn theoretically, right? And this is what we call practical wisdom. It's knowledge. Think of it like this. It's learning how to apply theoretical knowledge, right? And you don't get one without the other, frankly. Even mathematics, the most rational of all of our sciences, right? Even in mathematics, when you run a proof with complex mathematics, do you run that proof in your head? No. You either write it out or you run it through a computer. And do you do it just once? No. You do it over and over and over, because that's part of the validation process, right? You have to make sure you didn't make an error. And so you can't just run the proof once and say, I'm done. You have to run that proof over and over and over to verify that you didn't make a mistake, and to verify that the computer didn't make a mistake. And guess what that is? That's experience. That's practical. So there's this really, really, really close connection between the intellectual virtues and just, I would say, just like intellect um, together, and that's why it's in that the drawing the way it is there. They're connected to each other. You don't get one without the other.